Hi everybody, my name is Barry Schwartz and this is the Search Buzz video recap. Today is Friday, March 13th, and this is the search news we covered over the past week at the Search Engine Roundtable at seroundtable.com. First up, a lot of confusion over Panda, what's going on with Panda. We discussed last week that Gary from Google said that it's running in real time, wasn't really sure what that meant. Truth is, I don't think it does run necessarily in real time because those sites have really recovered since October, around October 24th. So I asked John Mueller about this in a Google Hangout this past week, and John Mueller basically said he's not sure what Gary was referring to on the real-time factor. He has some ideas, but not exactly. But he did say that Panda has not run in a while, and it's probably in that October date range. He's not sure if it's October 24th, but definitely hasn't been run since November. And thus, no sites would have seen a major or a significant bump up in terms of the traffic if they were hit by Panda, and they would not have recovered until Google runs a refresh on that, which they have not done. So there's a lot more about Panda. It hasn't run in a while, so definitely take a look at that. Google promises to clarify to me, hopefully sooner than later, what they meant by real time versus what hasn't run refresh since October and so forth. And I'm working with Google, specifically with their press team, hopefully to get an answer for you on that. Gary also confirmed that he's involved in that on Google+, and I guess we're going to see what happens with that in the near future. Talking about algorithms, Google's Penguin algorithm is still not running monthly, which is interesting. Which is interesting because Panda was supposed to be running regularly and monthly, and it hasn't run in over 4 months. Anyway, on the Penguin side, the Penguin algorithm is definitely not running monthly. We asked this again. Josh asked this in Google Plus Hangout to John, and John said at the moment, I don't think meaning Google Penguin, is on a monthly schedule. We're trying to get to be more regular, but at the moment it's not something that's rolling out monthly. So again, Google Penguin, which was supposed to be much more faster, more frequent, and so forth, back when Penguin 3.0 launched in November or so. November. It has been running since in early December and then stopped. Now it's been over 3 months since the Penguin update, and it's still not running monthly or regularly. So if you got hit by Penguin, you still have to wait. Speaking of that, this morning, John Mueller basically confirmed that Google would confirm, if asked, when the next Penguin algorithm is released. They're going to try to confirm it and say, yes, a Penguin algorithm has been released, like they did last year with the Penguin 3.0 update. We talked last week about the fact algorithm, where it ranks web pages based off of facts. It was a pretty interesting paper, but Google's John Mueller said, which most of you, I think, already know, that although Google wrote a paper, it doesn't necessarily use what's written in the paper. They wrote a paper to write a paper to see maybe they get a patent on that paper or whatever it might be, but it's definitely, because John Mueller said, it's definitely not being used today in Google's algorithms. Google's not ranking web pages based off of factual data, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Google Webmaster Tools has updated their fetch and render report, as well as added a blocked resources report. This is very important because Google's really pushing hard to say, hey, we want to render your whole page, don't block CSS, do not block JavaScript, and so forth. So now the fetch and render tool looks like this. This is how Googlebot saw your page versus this is how a user would see your page. So it's actually showing you the difference, which is pretty cool. And obviously for Google to show you this, they know what they're seeing. In addition, Google released a new block resources report, which basically go through different ways for you to actually go by host to see which resources are blocked by host and click deeper and deeper to see where those resources are being blocked. And here's a picture of what it looks like. So you can see here's WordPress being blocked, Overture, which is Yahoo ads, Tweet, which is Twit, which is basically a podcast or a video cast, and you can click on each one to see which pages are affected and more details about what's being blocked specifically, which is a very useful report, especially as Google tells webmasters, hey, stop blocking us. Google Webmaster Tools, the first version, which launched in 2008, is being discontinued or sunset. The new one, which came out back in September 2014, will replace it. You have until April 20th of this year to actually go ahead and, if you're using any code on the first version, get rid of it, update it to the version 2 of Google Webmaster Tools. It is missing 2 things that the first version supported. One is messaging data, like Google Messages and Webmaster Tools. as well as keywords for the content reports. It's not search query data, but keywords for the content reports. So last week at XMX, Gary also mentioned that Google's going to make an announcement about Ajax crawlable guidelines. And basically what's going to happen, I believe, is that Google's going to say, hey, these guidelines are no longer valid. We're much better at crawling JavaScript. And obviously Ajax is very advanced JavaScript. So just make sure you don't block your resources so that we can actually get into the content of your Ajax files and so forth so that we can crawl it. As long as you're not blocking it, you don't have to go by these Ajax crawlable guidelines. And I asked John Mueller more about that, and he basically went on a pretty long, detailed response about what it means. And obviously, we're going to have to wait till they announce something, but it seems like if you do have a site built in Ajax, the main thing right now, do not block resources that actually built. Do not block your JavaScript, CSS, and so forth, so that Google can actually get at it if you want it indexed. Another thing, a technical thing, is that Google has said in the past that you do A/B testing. You can't A/B test based off a user agent. You can't say Googlebot sees this, user sees this, and so forth. It says user agent don't A/B test on, but sometimes you want to. So let's say you want to test how an iPad would render a web page. The iPad user would render a web page responsive versus MDOT versus dynamic serving. So if you want to A/B test that by user agent saying iPad users, technically you can. John Mueller went into a little bit of a detailed response saying when you can, when you can't, what you should worry about. In short, if you're going to do it for a short period of time. This way you don't get in trouble or run into issues with crawlability or indexing. Google has updated their rich snippets guidelines, specifically, let's close this out, specifically with reviews and ratings. And the interesting thing is, we know this. We know that you can't use reviews or ratings on general categories or items like hotels in Madrid. You don't want to just have a whole listing page and have that listing page in Google search results have a ratings or review snippet. Google said that they updated their documentation for that. They give examples. They said, for example, hotels in Madrid is one of those examples of pages that shouldn't have it. But what's interesting is that if you look at hotels in Madrid, you can't get past. First, the whole first page is just ads. So here ads from the hotel bookings feature in Google. The cool thing is, or the interesting thing is, they're not applying the same organic guidelines to their ads. Why do they have ratings on these things? Why are there ratings here? Why are there ratings here? If Google doesn't want ratings on their organic category listing pages, why should they be on the paid search organic listings? Google just has to be consistent. I know they're different departments, but they really do have to be consistent, especially when they update their guidelines. And Google should be the first that complies with those guidelines. Google Maps has added a new report that lets people report problems, specifically enabling moving locations. So in the past, it was very simple, a very basic, horrible actually report where you can actually click on a result like Google, mark the place as closed or doesn't exist. Now they actually give you an option to say moved elsewhere, as well as the other options. You can also add a note and submit it to Google so they can actually make a change to that feature, which is nice. WordPress users, about 14 million of them, were vulnerable to SQL injection, just blind SQL injection attacks. If you were using the Yoast WordPress API plugin, which supposedly about 14 million WordPress blogs were, there was a issue where there was some type of vulnerability where people could actually blindly inject SQL. In some cases, it wasn't really easy to do so, but it was able to do so. The cool thing about this was Yoast was able to actually work it out, or to work it out with WordPress, that they actually pushed out automatic updates to most users. So you should be covered. Again, just make sure you check to make sure the latest version. If you're using WordPress, make sure you're the latest version of that Yoast SEO plugin. This is interesting. So Gary from Google announced also last week. Actually, he actually posted this on Google Plus, not at XMX. Basically saying they ran a small analysis of HTTPS URLs, and they found that 80% of the HTTPS URLs eligible to be included in Google's index were not, because the user or their webmaster was specifically saying use the HTTP version, not the HTTPS version. So he's basically saying, why? If you have the HTTPS version, let us use the HTTPS version as opposed to that. And there's about 80% of those URLs fall in that case, which is interesting. Two more topics. Google launched their car insurance portal, which pretty much discussed last week. But yeah, of course, this obviously upsets some webmasters in that niche. So if you are selling car insurance, it's only in California right now, but if you are selling car insurance, this is another way of Google monetizing stuff, and you can go ahead and see why people are upset about that, because Google's getting into your vertical again. And finally, this is interesting because Webmaster has asked John Mueller, when is Matt Cutts coming back? Is he ever coming back? We've been asking that question for a while. We do miss Matt Cutts. It's sad to see him almost gone for almost a year now, 10 months or so. And basically, you can see John Mueller respond to it, which is interesting to watch his reaction. I don't think he knows what the current status of Matt Cutts is in terms of if he's coming back or not. But he basically said, I don't know. You'd have to ask him directly, I guess. He's not completely gone, so I won't say too much, meaning he probably does drop in and do meetings and so forth with Googlers. But I think it's something you have to. I can't really answer. It's essentially a personal question for Matt. So feel free to ask him directly if you want. In Twitter, maybe he can tell you something. Maybe he doesn't want to. It's up to him. Hopefully, we'll hear from Matt Cutts in terms of what his plans are very soon. We do miss you, Matt, if you're watching, and hopefully you'll make a decision that's best for you and for your family and so forth. Anyway, thanks so much for listening to the Search Buzz Video Recap. My name again is Barry Schwartz, and this is the search news we covered over at the Search Engine Roundtable at seroundtable.com over the past week. Again, today is Friday, March 13th. Everyone have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next. Bye.